Good afternoon, Canisius High School community. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President, back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular Zoom series where we check in with our alums all over the country and figure out what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware. I am joined today by a very special guest all the way from Charlottesville, Virginia, Mr. Fred Wolf from the class of 1985. Fred, how are you?
Doing great, Andy. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining me today. Fred is a partner in the architecture firm Wolf Ackerman, which is based in Charlottesville. And Fred, let's just start with your firm. What kind of work does Wolf Ackerman do?
We do a whole range of work. We do everything from residential projects to commercial and retail projects for offices and upfits and storefronts, office buildings, and some small institutional projects for a variety of clients. Some of which are nonprofits, others are for profits. But that's kind of our sweet spot. We're typically between 4 and 6 people. Right now, we're operating at 3. We've been in practice since 2002, so we've just passed our 21-year anniversary, and yeah.
And in a few minutes, we're going to get into a little bit about the benefits of having a small firm and being able to pick, projects and the kind of projects that you're doing. But before we do that, let's go travel back in time. If you're a class of 85, that means in 1981, you were looking at high schools, and there has been a whole slew of Wolf brothers that have come through Canisius High School.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, Fred, tell me how you've heard about Canisius and sort of your impressions when you got there.
Yeah, well, I was all of us, we grew up in Lancaster first and then moved to East Aurora. And we all went through St. Mary's Elementary in Lancaster. My parents were really committed to that. They've always been very committed to education. My dad would say you can't have enough education. Always go get more. Sure. It's never going to hurt you. So that was great. And they, I would have to say that they were attracted to Canisius and the model that it set. I didn't know as much about it, but it was a coincidence maybe that right as I was finishing elementary school, my parents moved from Lancaster to East Aurora. So it was kind of perfect timing. I didn't really know anyone in East Aurora, so the difference between getting in the car and coming downtown and going to school downtown and at Canisius versus going to a new school at East Aurora was going to be something different either way. And, it actually ended up being one of the best things. I will admit at the beginning, I had some questions about being sent to, an all boys high school and, going downtown, and just felt different than, sticking with even my grade school was girls and boys. So going on to maybe a more traditional high school in East Aurora or Lancaster, but it ended up being a fantastic thing.
And I hear that a lot, a lot of us, as we come in the first time, the fear of the unknown, and maybe it's a little non-traditional, but as you get there and you, as our principal always says, you jump in with 2 feet and you start to get involved, you realize what a special place it can be. So tell me about, who are some of your early influences or at Canisius, and what kind of clubs and activities were you involved in as a student?
Well, early influences, Father Bowler was there at the time. And he was a great president and principal. There were a handful of people. I certainly remember Mr. McGillicuddy, who was a fixture at the time.
Sure.
Father Nauman, who was a fantastic English teacher, very, very sharp, and had a great sense of wit, very wry humor, but and there were so many more. I mean, it was actually a great mix of Jesuits and then obviously the lay faculty who were there as well. It was really fantastic. I participated. I played hockey. I also ran cross country and track early on. Sure. Played hockey all the way through, and played golf for a while on the golf team. I was not at the front of the card. I was at the back of the card in that exercise, but loved the sports, particularly cross country, and was really great. the track was less interesting to me, but I did it as an extension of cross country. But at some point, hockey just ran so long and was so much, and I was playing for Canisius as well as another club team, so you put all those games and practices together, and there's just not a lot of time for other stuff that starts in the fall or starts in the spring, because in hockey, in Buffalo, hockey starts during
Yeah,
the summer and it ends during the summer.
that's right. That's right.
You
That's
pretty
right.
much have to be committed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so, you graduate in 1985 and you start your post CHS career. Tell us a little bit about college, and then, briefly tell us how you got all the way to where you are now, which is, owning and being part of your own architecture firm.
Well, I had, again, I said my father was really interested in education, just best education you can get, learn as much as you can, absorb, absorb, absorb. Um, we put together a pretty healthy, dense list of colleges that we would look at. And it used to be a joke that he was overly involved, very active in everybody's college application process. I think he enjoyed it much more than we did when we were putting applications together. Um, but I had a dozen schools, most of them up north, in the obvious, the obvious suspects up north. Um, but we came down to Virginia or to DC to go look at Georgetown. And he had one very close friend who had two kids who went to UVA, to University of Virginia. And they both went here. I think they both did engineering, but they also both wrestled for the university. And he just could not stop singing the praises of the school. And, then you start to look it up and realize at the time UVA was very, very highly ranked as a public institution. And also, when you got six kids, I guess you're thinking about this. It was considered to be financially a really good deal when you look at what you were spending at some other schools. And so I didn't really have a lot to say about it. We drove from DC down to Charlottesville, and I think at that point I had already made an early decision. Um, said what my preference would be on college, which would have been Penn, which would have been a weird fit because they don't have an undergraduate architecture program, but I really liked that school. And Penn, I got waitlisted at, and when I saw UVA, everything flipped. I said, "This is the spot." It was an amazing, amazing site, amazing location, the history, the buildings, the landscape. It was remarkable. And as you also know, if you come down to somewhere in the South in late October, early November, and Buffalo's already starting to maybe see its first snowflakes, and you come down here and it's 70 and there's go-eds running around and the sun's out and the leaves are all burnt orange and red. It was kind of hard to dismiss the beauty of the place and the fact that it has a remarkable architecture program. And I knew early on that I wanted to be an architect. I always said that, and people backed it up by saying, well, you're really good at art and you're very good at math, which is kind of a misnomer that you have to be those things to go into architecture. But I really that's what I thought I wanted to do. And in this junior year of high school, I went and did a 6-week program at Cornell, their summer program, where you can study architecture and see what the course load is like, see what it feels like to be in the studio, understand what the differences are versus just going into a class with a textbook, because it's very different. You've got a bevy of tools and odd things like drawing boards and Maylines and T-squares, and you're left with these questions that are very vague and answers that are not in a book anywhere. So, how do you approach that? Do you like that kind of circumstance? So I knew early on most of the places I looked at had architecture programs, and whether or not I did it undergraduate and then did a master's or just did something else undergraduate and then did master's architecture, I knew that's probably what I was going to do. So UVA was a perfect fit.
That's great. And Wolf Ackerman wasn't a thing, right out of college, I imagine. You probably had to pay your dues, live in a few different cities. And so tell us a little bit about that journey.
So after college, I got a job with an architect in Princeton, who at the time was the dean of Princeton. He had also just won this enormous award for this major complex in New Delhi, India. And it was all over the cover of the magazines. And so I was able to get a job with him and went up to Princeton and was there, but I was only there probably for 6 or 8 months before there was a coup in New Delhi. And that project got shut down. And this guy was kind enough, instead of letting me go, he found me a position with another architect in town who was also a professor at Princeton, Michael Graves, who's probably much better known by name than my guy was. And I stayed there for 2 years. And then when it was time to look at grad schools, the grad school setup at UVA is very different than the undergraduate. In other words, there's a very different collection of professors. They get really interesting visiting faculty to come in, whereas the undergraduate is largely done by a series of tenured people and then a mix of local people who fill in, which is something that I and my business partner have done over time too, just gone in and teach as a local adjunct. But so it was an easy choice. I also had a connection with a person back here at the time, a relationship.
Right.
So coming back to Charlottesville made a lot of sense. And as I said, I've always loved it. This place has a nickname. It's called The Hook. Charlottesville, that's the nickname for the town. It's The Hook because when it gets its hook in you, it's hard to leave. People constantly come back. And once you have a chance to pick where you want to live, it's a hard one to overlook. So came back for graduate school, and it was here in grad school that I met my wife. She's a landscape architect. She had an extra year of program to do, so I worked for a year here, and then we moved up to New York City, and we were there for almost 6 years, from '94 to almost 2000. And in that time, I came back here and did a semester where I taught as a visiting faculty person. Taught some fourth year, which is basically a senior undergraduate program for design, and loved it. And realized how many of our friends, close friends, were still here and how they were carving out a life and enjoying it. And so when we realized that we needed to move on from New York if we wanted to be able to spread our wings a little bit, we started looking all over, and we could not really come to any agreement on where to go that was mutually agreed upon. And Charlottesville became a really easy spot to think about. Let's go back there. We got a soft landing. We can work, and then we can figure out if we want to do something else from there. And that was 1999 in the fall, and we've been here since. We both love it. My wife is landed a great job that did work nationally and internationally, and now has her own practice. Wow. And I went back with a firm that I worked with briefly before we went to New York City. Stayed with them for about a year and a half, and then was able to carve out some jobs and to move off onto my own. And then eventually my friend, who's now my business partner, also moved off and away from his employment, and we decided to partner up. And it's been great. We originally had aspirations of doing something more in a design build model, but we're really purely a design firm. We don't handle construction, but both of us have worked in construction and have background in it. And so we really have a strong appreciation for the challenges and the sort of limitations of reality when you're talking about designing something and asking somebody to make something for you, to build something. So that informs a lot of our work and the way we approach our design and our aesthetic.
And so as you look back, and you've been a professional now for a number of years, how did your time at Canisius prepare you for your adult life, both professionally and personally?
Well, I think Canisius obviously asks a lot of us as students. It pushes us to try to, I would say, to try to stretch ourselves. Sure, I think is a good way to say it. To shoot beyond what we think we can achieve, and I think that's a big part of owning your own business or starting a practice. The other thing is not being afraid to fail. I mean, Canisius gives you a wonderful, I don't want to say safety net, but it's a support system, and it's a bit of a safety net, but it's encouragement to take risks and take chances, and to be able to go out and try things. And understanding there are repercussions, but also that you have to do that if you want to expand yourself as a person and as a professional. So I think the other thing is that Canisius obviously has a strong history and tradition in service.
Sure.
And you know, looking at, regardless of what your religion or religious affiliations are, or your level of practice, I think there's always a solid foundation in just thinking about treating other people the way you want to be treated. And so looking for opportunities, you know, our firm, our practice, I'm not going to make any, I'm not going to try to suggest that we just are running around just doing service projects. We are a for-profit business. We have to be. But we look for opportunities and try to embrace projects from time to time that give us a chance to give back, particularly in our community, and with people that, you know, we work with and live with. So when those projects come up, we find ways. It's not always in our community. I mean, right now we have an amazing group here too, which is something called the Building Goodness Foundation. We do projects. They've done a lot of work in Haiti. They're doing work in Guatemala. We've done projects with them down in Haiti, and now we're doing a small school in Guatemala. But we've also done, you know, a day shelter for the homeless and working poor here that we did in town. And we've done projects for this nonprofit called Lighthouse that works with kids who are from, you know, I would say 8 to 18, and at every socioeconomic range. So kids in public housing, as well as kids coming from very affluent families, all working side by side, doing these summer programs that teach young kids how to think about a story, craft a story, go out, shoot, film, produce a story, edit it, and then have these wonderful, really fun film festivals that wrap up the end of the summer. And they're great fundraising for that group, but they're also a wonderful moment where everybody has a lot of pride and appreciation for the work they did, coming from nowhere, learning how to do that. And a lot of those kids have gone on to have really successful careers at like NYU and USC film schools, and you know, gone on to other film festivals that are actually more legitimate. So so it's actually producing, but it's also building community here. And so we've done projects with folks like that over the years, and we try to find ways to obviously provide deep discounts and make design and our what we provide affordable and accessible to everyone.
Well, it's great to see your Canisius High School education and the philosophy, you know, at work in your professional life. So if you could, you know, look back and give yourself, your younger self, a couple pieces of advice, just something that you would share with our, you know, the idea is our alum will be watching this, our students that are in college will be watching this, people that are just graduating and making their way into the wider world. Just how about a couple pieces of advice for the young people out there as they start to make their way?
I mean, the first thing I would say is, and this is particularly true in our profession, patience is important. You don't get it all in one shot, and you know, people have this desire to achieve, whether or not it's a level of seniority or a level of pay or a level of whatever, really quickly. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes people, you know, lock into that. But, you know, the reality is that it comes from, can you still hear me? I just got a note.
Yeah.
Okay. I think something's going on with my earbuds, but I'll just take those out. So I think patience is important, that, you know, you put in the work and stuff comes with being diligent, and you don't have to see everything all at once. Things can unfold, right? We all know life's a connection, or it's a bunch of small experiences that come together to make a bigger experience, you know, sort of portfolio of what you're able to do. So I would say that, and you know, the other thing is, don't be afraid to take chances. Sure. You know, this is something I think, particularly most coming from Canisius,
probably have a safety net behind them, so that helps. I will say that Charlottesville also, I don't know how to explain this, but I always felt this about this town, and it might be different. It might have been different in New York had we stayed there in the city, but you could try things and you felt like if you failed, it would not be devastating, and so it sort of gave you the confidence to push yourself. We have certainly achieved some projects here that we reached for and got, and but it took years to build the portfolio and the level of work that we're trying to do and doing now. And so now in our mid 50s, late 50s, finally doing the kinds of projects I want, but we never look at a project, say that's too small or that's insignificant or we're above that. We're constantly looking at projects that are about building relationships and working with people we like who share passion for what we're doing. So, patience, take chances, and I'm going to go back to the thing I said earlier, which is just I don't know if I'm always perfect on this front, but I try to do this. And I think if we all treated everybody the way we want to be treated, you look around, watch the news, we'd all be in a better position if that was happening. So that seems like an easy one to do.
All great advice. Thank you so much, Fred. And thanks for joining us today, for giving us a little bit of a glimpse into your history and your journey from Canisius High School. If you ever make it back this way, we would love to have you back at the school. A lot has changed since you've moved to Charlottesville, or we have a couple of projects going on here ourselves right now, our Center for Global Learning. But don't be a stranger, and hopefully we'll see you around campus sometime soon.
Listen, I'm always excited when I still see, our football program doing what it's doing, our hockey team doing what it's doing, and all the new buildings that I have seen. And I know because I still have two brothers up there. So I've seen some of the expansion and the new stuff that's going on in Buffalo. And it's a really exciting time. And I'm glad to see Canisius doing so well and being so healthy.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon, Fred.
Sounds great.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.